They smile in your face. All the while they want to take your place. Them backstabbers, them backstabbers. This is your captain speaking. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for takeoff. Fold away your tray and put your seats in an upright position. Turn all electrical devices off. Yes, what's happening, people? Hatman Strikes Back, daily boxing news, but this is a night flight, so we can talk about whatever on a night flight, expand the topics out. If we're talking about controversial stuff, which isn't friendly for this platform, then we'll use euphemisms, all right? Let me know you can hear me in the live chat. Rastafari, that's right. We got Jack Trustler in here, Dominic A, Tawheed, Exactamundo, JM, Samil, KB, Ortega, Mr. Luca in the chat. Fabian, Niklaus, JR, Regulus, David Fisher, Debiaka, Lucas Encircled, Real Bad Man, that's right. JM, Connor Williams, Mac B, David Fisher. Let's go indeed. AOK, Real HD Gamers. Yeah, we could talk about gaming a bit. We talked about it a little bit towards the end of the last stream. So I'd like to talk more about gaming, actually. Maybe we'll start with that. Shout out to Fernie G. Big up Sean. Sean says, I could be a Bucci. Can he make a big push? Hell no. He's 52 years of age. He looks terrible in training. I mean, he looks good for a man of his age, but nowhere near good enough to be competing with world-level heavyweights. I mean, really and truly, if they put him in against a solid journeyman, he'd get knocked out. So, no, Bear Bucci is completely delusional, but I'm not going to judge the man. Maybe he doesn't have anything else to focus on in his life, you know? Shout out to President Brush. Yeah, big up, Mark. JM says, I don't like seeing old men fight. Thank you, Exactamundo and JM. The audio is fine. Okay. So, yeah, let's talk about gaming a little bit. What do you guys think of the Yeah, Ben Oldham, actually, I saw Ibeabuchi on some Nigerian news program calling out Alexander Usyk, saying that, you know, Atama's too young to really be a threat. So he's going after Alexander Usyk. It's delusion of the highest order. Shout out to President Brush for the super chat. He says, Ibeabuchi versus Shannon Briggs. Who do you have? Ibeabuchi. Yeah, Ibeabuchi, because Briggs, when he was young, wasn't that tough. He got stopped by Darrell Wilson in, 3 or 4 rounds. He got stopped by Lennox Lewis. And obviously styles make fights, but yeah, Briggs wasn't that tough. I mean, he didn't have a terrible chin. He claims that he had asthma, and that's the reason he used to gas out. He blames his first defeat, which was against Darrell Wilson, on the asthma. I can't remember if he blamed the Lennox Lewis defeat on asthma. But for whatever reason, he couldn't really take much punishment in his younger days. By the time he was in his, what must have been late 30s or 40s when he fought Vitaly Klitschko, he could take a beating then. But was that the roids? I don't know. Or maybe he was just mentally tougher or got over the asthma. I don't know what it was. But the young the young Shannon Briggs couldn't really take it. So I'd have to give it to Ibeabuchi. I mean, Ibeabuchi, a hell of a lot better than Darrell Wilson, who gave Briggs his first loss. So yeah, shout out to President Brush. But who have you got in the fight? Me, I got Ibeabuchi by stoppage. But who have you got? That's right, Debiaka. Shannon Briggs still holds the record for most first round knockouts of any former heavyweight champion. Champion or former champion. I'm sure there are other heavyweights out there that have got more first round knockouts than Briggs, but they were not heavyweight champion at any point in their career. Because if you go back into the early 20th century and look on BoxRec, there were some guys that had 300 pro fights. They were literally fighting every week. And a lot of the people that were fighting were people pulled out of bars and complete puddings, and, you know, they chinned loads of people in the first round. But in terms of guys who actually were champions, Shannon Briggs, last I checked, has still got the record for most first round knockouts. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, Raja Jackson needs to go to jail ASAP. I don't even know who that is. Let me Google that quick. Don't know who Raja Jackson is. Let me look that up. Oh my God. There was a fly flying around in here, which may turn into a problem. Why do flies have a death wish? You guys ever wondered that? There are two types of creatures that seem to have a death wish. One are flies, and the other is certain types of birds. You ever been driving down the street and there's a bird in the road and it won't fly away until it literally disappears behind your bonnet? I mean, what's all that about? Why do birds do that? They can see the car coming, but they'll stay there until literally the last second, then they'll fly off. How weird is that? Okay, so Raja Jackson is Rampage's son. What has he done here? Let's have a look. Okay. The organizer of the event, at which former UFC champion Rampage Jackson's son appeared to violently assault wrestler Stuart Smith, has described the incident as reprehensible. Oh, I don't even know about this. What exactly did he do? Without me having to read the full article. Mark Odell says, pigeons are the worst. Some have gone through my windscreen. Yeah. I remember going down the motorway somewhere a few years ago. This was during shutdown. Let's just call it shutdown. And I was driving somewhere to the seaside. And literally, this is a busy motorway. And some bird, I don't think it was a pigeon, I think it might have been a crow or a raven, literally swooped down over the motorway and hit my windscreen and scratched it up. My windscreen had like scratch marks on it and blood. I'm like, what on earth is all that about? Because I saw the bird coming in. You know them ones? It swooped in low. It's a flipping motorway. It can see all the cars driving about. It swooped in low in front of my windscreen on some kamikaze-ish. What on earth is all that about? Matt says, 27 unanswered punches while unconscious after body slamming him. Unconscious after he used the prop can on his head at a wrestling event 1 hour after the incident. He essentially apologized and forgave the guy. Proceeded to try and murder him 1 hour later alive. Okay, so was this during a fight or was it like an outside the octagon type situation? Oh, during a WWE event outside the octagon. Okay. So, he's vicious then. JM says apparently it was arranged beforehand. He's talking about the Rampage thing. I don't know, man. I don't really follow these guys like that, but that sounds like a vicious attack. What was their beef over? Why did they have an issue? Matt says he hasn't been arrested yet either. Okay, it was a misunderstanding. All right. People saying he needs to be locked up. I might watch it after the stream. It's not really the kind of thing I follow like that, but okay. But yeah, I really want to talk about gaming. So, what do you guys think about the state of gaming right now? On the previous stream, there were several people, and I agree with it, that say that this is the weakest generation yet. Encircled says mainstream is bad, but indie is good. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says the wrestler thought he was a wrestler and hit a fake prop can over his head because he saw the cameras. Raja initially forgave him, but then got angry when his kick chat called him out and he attacked. Okay. Shout out to Lawrence King. On Planet Talks Boxing says, gaming's been dead, Hatman. Latest game I bought was Gears of War because it was good back in the days. Yeah, and because they keep remastering everything, you know? They remaster your favorite game, hit you with all that nostalgia, tell you it's 4K, 60 frames. If you're lucky, they'll add a little bit of extra content and they'll sell it to you at full price. Jupiter's String says, gaming is weak, fun gameplay, but stories are diluted, difficulty has declined for games other than Souls-like. And for me, that's a good thing. I'm not built like that, bro, for those difficult, techie type of games. The RPGs and all that. I don't need that kind of stress in my life. I mean, I did like Bloodborne, but I really struggled through it. I never finished Bloodborne. I only played about maybe, I don't know, a quarter of the game, a third of the game. But yeah, for me, them kind of games are just too much. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, I stopped gaming a long time ago. Is gaming today like movies? All remakes and crap? That's the perception I have. There's a hell of a lot of remakes, remasters and stuff like that. I don't think it's as bad as movies, though. There are original IPs. Quite a lot of original IPs still coming out. With movies, my perception is that it's far worse than gaming. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, companies by law should complete early access. Nicholas says Bloodborne was brutal. Yeah, I was drawn in by Bloodborne because I really don't like RPGs and stuff like that. But I love the gothic, like medieval England aesthetic of Bloodborne. That's what I was drawn in by. Because I've always liked medieval, like European architecture, you know? There's something atmospheric about it. And so I was kind of drawn in by the aesthetic because it was a game that was free. I think it was free on PlayStation Plus at one point, which is why I downloaded it. And I was hesitant to do so because I knew it was a difficult game. But I played it and I kind of got into it. And as I say, got through about a third of the game. But obviously, as you go along, it gets more and more difficult. And you have to do a ridiculous amount of farming, or at least I do, somebody who's not that skilled at those kind of games, do a ridiculous amount of farming to level up your character in order to take on the next boss. And I left Bloodborne alone, hoping that there would be, we're talking about remasters, hoping there'd be a remaster because I don't like playing in 30 frames per second. And Bloodborne has a lot of frame pacing issues. So even though it's 30 frames, which is lower than I can accept these days, the frame pacing at times makes it seem less than 30 frames a second, you know? So I just left it alone, hoping they would remaster it or come out with a patch or something, and they never did. It's incredible because up until Elden Ring, Bloodborne was From Software's most successful game, I think. So it's kind of baffling that they didn't come out with a 60 FPS patch or, you know, whatever the case may be, because that came out on PS4. You would have thought they would have given it a 60 FPS patch, backwards compatibility for PS5, but no. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, Hatman, do you hear about the Passport Bros drama in Kenya with a guy, Jay Rello? No, tell me about it. What's the drama? Enlighten me. Shout out to Lawrence King for the super chat. He says, last game I ever played was Championship Manager 0304, and I had to break the CD to stop myself from playing it all day. Yeah, that's some gaming addiction right there. Shout out to GMS Nightmare. He says, if White and Wilder fight in Southpaw, who'd win? If they fought each other Southpaw? Or are you talking about the movie Southpaw? Am I misconstruing the question? Striker says, Hatman, do you have a gaming chat on your Element group? Yes. Just remind me in the Element group and I'll add you to it. Just at me in the boxing room. Fought each other in Southpaw. Well, I've never seen the movie Southpaw, so I'm missing the context of it. But if they fought in real life, my view has always been that Dylan White would get knocked out. Long John Silver says the most recent Ratchet and Clank game is really good. I played a little bit of, I think, what was the most recent Ratchet and Clank game. Couldn't really get into it. I quite liked Crash Bandicoot, the newest Crash Bandicoot. What was it called? Something in Time or whatever it was. That was cool. That was quite cool. Big up Sanjay for the super chat. He says, thoughts? Apocalypse Now movie and decoding. Apocalypse Now is one of my favorite movies of all time. I love Apocalypse Now. There you go. Mental Elf Ambassador says A Crack in Time was the best one. I think that's the one I played, the one I'm referring to. Yeah, I really liked that game. I thought it was cool. And it really gets quite challenging the further you get into it. But yeah, Apocalypse Now, one of my favorite movies of all time. I love the atmosphere. I love the 1980s synth soundtrack. I love the story, the performances, the voiceover. I thought Martin Sheen was fantastic. It's got a very young Lawrence Fishburne in it. He was 17 years of age, I think, when they made that movie. Robert Duvall is also good in it. I love the smell of napalm in the morning. That character. And obviously, Colonel Kurtz. So yeah, I love Apocalypse Now. I like Apocalypse Now Redux as well. That's how much I like the movie. As far as decoding the movie, I haven't really looked at it with a view to decoding it. but maybe I could do something like that because it's definitely one of my favorite movies. Shout out to Sanjay for the super chat. Do you like Apocalypse Now? Shout out to Bobs. He says, archaeologist IRL and spoke to Julian Richardson this year. In the 80s, he tried to move Sarsen-sized stones using ropes and hundreds of people barely moved. Okay, so this is alluding to like the construction of the pyramids, but particularly the stones at Baalbek. Yeah, I've never heard anything sensible from anybody regarding how, in particular, the stones at Baalbek were moved. I've never heard anything sensible. And so, even on Wikipedia, it says it's unclear and unknown how the stones were moved. Because there was some joker several months ago who was adamant that the stones at Baalbek were moved with sleds and, or moved with rollers or some log rollers. Are you having a laugh? 1,000-ton stones over hilly terrain. People don't have any concept of how heavy that is. How heavy it is. 1,000-ton stones moved, 2 miles over hilly terrain and then lifted into place? Yeah, that is not being done with log rollers. But shout out to Bobs for the super chat. Shout out to Lawrence King. He says, for me, nothing can beat GoldenEye on N64 with the gold controller. Best childhood going. I never actually played that. I know so many people swear by GoldenEye and they say it was amazing and it was really the first great first-person shooter game. So many people have said that. But I never actually played it, at least not as far as I can remember. Okay, Locatus of Borg says Apocalypse Now was a 70s movie and Lawrence Fishburne was 15. He lied to get the part. Is that right? Did it come out in the late 70s rather than the 80s? It's got a typically 80s soundtrack, or, what came to be known as the 80s sound. You're right, 79, so 1 year off the 80s. So pretty much the 80s, in terms of the visual aesthetic, the sound, and all that kind of thing. What about 1979? Shout out to Lawrence King. He says, the Bible claims those stones were moved by giants that used to roam the earth. I believe that as a Christian, but I respect anyone who doesn't. Well, I'm not aware of them saying that the Baalbek stones were moved like that, but in the Bible it does say that there were giants in the earth in those days, but there are many different interpretations of what that means. Literal giants? Figurative giants? And when we say giants, exactly what size? Goliath was supposed to be a giant, but there are some interpretations of the units of measure that they use for Goliath that say he was only about 7 feet tall. In the ancient world, in many parts of the world where the average height of a man might have been 5'2", a 7-foot man is definitely going to be classed as a giant, innit? But yeah, in terms of moving stones of that size, you'd need a lot bigger than a few 7-foot men. You'd need like proper giants, Jack and the Beanstalk type giants to move stones of that size. Debiaka says, do you think moving them stones with electromagnetism is a possibility? Until they come up with something, and I'm talking about the mainstream scientists and archaeologists and all these kind of people, until they come up with something sensible, then that theory is as good as any, or that hypothesis, that idea, that notion is as good as any. Shout out to Star Fox. He says, yeah, chocolate logs, Hatman, wise up, bro. Anthony YouTube says, have you heard Eminem's unreleased track he just dropped? Everybody looking at me. Sounds cold. No, I haven't. I really don't keep up with Eminem. The only Eminem album I liked ever was the Slim Shady LP. I didn't like any other Eminem album that's existed. The Slim Shady LP, and that's it. There was a few songs from subsequent albums that I liked, but in terms of a whole album, no, it was only the Slim Shady LP. It's the only one I liked. And most of his songs over the past 10 years miss me, bro. I'm just not into them. So if you want to talk about an exotic, I'm just going to call it exotic, an exotic hypothesis for not just the pyramids, Baalbek, and many other megalithic sites around the world, because there was a style of construction which for some reason went extinct, and it's called megalithic construction using enormous blocks of stone. The baffling thing about megalithic construction is that it seems unnecessarily difficult. The Romans showed how you could cut up, and even today in construction when people use stone, you can cut up large pieces of stone into smaller blocks that make them easier to transport and easier to fit into position. Since you can do that, why on earth would you use ginormous blocks weighing hundreds, or in the case of Baalbek, over 1,000 tons? Where's the logic in it? Trying to transport something that big doesn't make any logical sense. Just cut it up into smaller blocks and move it that way. So, the fact that megalithic construction existed in deep antiquity all over the world is inexplicable in itself. And why did it go extinct? Why did people stop creating megalithic structures? What happened? So there's an exotic hypothesis out there. And it's in relation to simulation theory. You know, even in quantum physics now, they're entertaining this possibility that our reality is some sort of extremely advanced simulation. Well, what if, like in the Matrix, there have been different versions of the simulation? You guys seen the Matrix movie where the architect is having that conversation? It's in the second movie. The architect is having that conversation with Neo, and he explains that there were previous versions of the Matrix. And in those previous versions, the rules were different. Well, if we entertain that idea, if reality is some type of simulation, maybe there were previous versions where the rules of physics were different. Do you know what I mean? Where maybe gravity was weaker. If that's the case, then maybe these big stones, megalithic architecture was being used, being practiced because it wasn't that difficult to move big stones because the gravity was weaker or people were stronger or whatever the case may be. Maybe there were other elements is not the really, other forces out there which could be utilized which don't exist in this version of the simulation. So it's an interesting idea, right? Can we prove it? Of course not. But it's an interesting thing to contemplate. And the way I've heard it described, because people say, well, why would the remnants of the previous simulation still exist. If you think about it like a video game, like Call of Duty is a perfect example. How many times have you played a new Call of Duty game and you notice a certain building or a certain car, even the map itself, and you think, hang on, this is just a reskinned version of a map or of an asset like a car or a building from the previous Call of Duty game. It's easier to reskin or rework an existing simulation than to create a brand new one from scratch. You see what I mean? So yeah, that's a hypothesis which is based on simulation theory, which I find very interesting. It'd make for a great sci-fi movie, right? And like I say, maybe the rules of physics were different in a previous version of the simulation, and these megalithic constructions are remnants of that. And Circle says, if the rules are different, wouldn't those buildings then just suddenly collapse and show evidence of that? Well, no, it depends what rules are different. It depends what rules are different. You know, giant blocks of stone, if the rules of physics were different in a previous simulation that made giant blocks of stone easier to move around, the blocks of stone aren't going to be any weaker. Well, yeah, that's the way you could describe it, Star Fox. They patched out megaliths. They nerfed or tinkered with the rules of physics somehow in our version of the simulation. If this is indeed a simulation, I find simulation theory fascinating because what do human beings do now in the computer age, in the technological age? We make computer games. Maybe human beings creating computer games, ever more realistic computer games, maybe that is being driven by the subconscious. A subconscious knowing that we actually live in a simulation ourselves. So now we're creating simulations within a simulation. You know what I mean? Like a fractal. Shout out to Suited and Booted. Nicholas says, once a civilization is that advanced, they could probably make a new simulation in nanoseconds. I don't see why that would be the case. Think about what we can do with, I don't know, a vivarium or something, right? Where we keep animals, or an aquarium where we keep fish. We can't change it all in seconds. So no, I think that's a bit presumptuous. It isn't necessarily easy. Debiarka says, we are in The Sims. Maybe. I'm very much open to simulation theory. And I think everybody should be. I think if you're not open to simulation theory, then you're never really going to figure anything out. You have to entertain these ideas. I'm not saying simulation theory is nailed on 100% correct and factual. I'm saying it's an interesting theory that needs to be explored. See, I tend to suspect that Demir is right. No matter what theory or hypothesis we come up with, the truth will be far stranger. Yeah, I agree with that. Why? Because when you think things through, on a metaphysical level, reality must be infinite, right? There can be no end to reality. People say, oh, how big is the universe? And scientists come up with these estimates. What's beyond the universe? We don't know. So, metaphysically, there has to be something beyond. Maybe the rules of physics are different outside of the universe, you know? So, yeah, I agree with what you said there. Whatever reality actually is, it's probably far stranger than anything we can comprehend. Very strange. Nicholas says, I do think simulation theory is interesting, but I don't think those stones are proof. Those stones are definitely not proof, but those stones are inexplicable. Simulation theory is just one way to try and explain something inexplicable, you know? How people move stones of that size in the ancient world without modern equipment and machinery is totally baffling. And I've never heard even one sensible explanation from any mainstream archaeologist or just mainstream type of individual, you know, who follows the mainstream and believes everything they tell him and, you know, waits for the mainstream to give them permission to be able to entertain any idea. I've never heard anything sensible. You know, how ancient people are moving 1,000-ton blocks and why they would even choose to do something that difficult. You just chop the blocks up. The Romans did it. If you ever look at a Roman column, Roman columns are made up of multiple different blocks, but they are fashioned in such a way to make it look like a single piece of stone. It's not a single piece of stone. They're multiple blocks, right? Because it's easier and more efficient to do things that way. A shout out to Ocean Blue for the super chat. He says, just dropping in to say, big up. Got a flight to catch, so I'll watch this stream later. Big up Ocean Blue. Where you flying to, my guy? Regular says, Men in Black ending scene. Yeah, with the, is it a dog or a cat? And they do like the fractal universe when they zoom into the dog or the cat's pendant or whatever it has around its neck, hanging from its collar. Yeah, I like that scene. Debiaka says they use big stones for the sake of it just to show off. I don't believe that even for 1 second. And even if I did believe it, it still doesn't explain how they were moved. I mean, the manpower it would take. I mean, people are going to die when you're moving blocks of that size. Understand that in the ancient world, as far as we're told, the global population was a fraction, a tiny, small fraction of what it is today. You needed people to be able to run society. People to tend to animals, animal husbandry, growing crops. People to make clothes and fashion tools. You know what I mean? So there are certain narratives about history which are very misleading. If you are using, I mean, I don't see any way you could move stones of that size. You're not going to use wooden rollers. If it can be done with wooden rollers, prove it. Let's see it today. Yeah? They can carve out 1,000-ton block of stone with modern machinery. They can do that. Let's see it moved then with men and wooden rollers across 2 miles of hilly landscape. Let's see it done. That's what science is supposed to be about. Experiment, prove it. And I'm telling you the reason they're not going to prove it is because it can't be done. It cannot be done like that. Nonsense. 1,000, like, people just don't even have any concept of how heavy 1,000 tons is. So let me put it into perspective. A jumbo jet weighs approximately 330 tons. So you're talking about one stone, which is like the equivalent of 3 jumbo jets in weight, with no wheels on to let you move it. Oh no, a flat-sided block of stone on hilly terrain, weighing as much as 3 jumbo jets. Yeah, that's not being moved with wooden rollers, bro. It's incredible that people think it could be. Eldon Joe says 10,000 men could probably pull it on rollers. I completely disagree. Something that size is going to squash those wooden rollers into the ground. Those wooden rollers under 1,000-ton block of stone are going to be flattened. You're not going to pull them across anything. Do you know what I mean? It's literally the physics of it, something that heavy. How would you even get the rollers underneath in the first place? They're going to be squashed down into the earth. Well, you know the surface. You can look for yourself in Baalbek. It's hilly terrain. It's like hilly grass and mud and dirt. Unless you had like concrete and not even wooden rollers. You need to use something harder than wood. Or at least the hardest wood in the world is what? Teak? From Africa? Yeah, you need to get that from Southern Africa, wherever they have teak. It can't be done. And it's not one block. It's multiple blocks that were transported, wherever it was, 2 miles across hilly grassland and, rocky terrain, and then lifted into position precisely in the base of this temple. One would be crazy enough. Multiple blocks of this size. Then how are they being lifted? How would 1,000 tons? Do you know how big the cranes are today that are required to lift something that's 1,000 tons? Go and look. They are flipping enormous, and it takes several cranes to lift something of that weight. So how they then, so they've transported it somehow by some miraculous method across hilly terrain. I mean, if you had 10,000 men trying to move something that big, you're going to have rope snapping. I mean, the amount of men for the size of the block, because the block is big, yes, but it's extremely dense in weight, right? So the amount of space that the men are going to need to be able to pull effectively doesn't work either. Like I say, everything is about experiment. Let's see them actually do it. If any of that is plausible, I think it's all totally ridiculous. The whole roller thing, I think it's ridiculous. If any of it is plausible, they need to actually demonstrate it with experiment. If they can demonstrate it with experiment, I might change my mind. But I'm telling you they can't demonstrate it with experiment because it can't be done like that. I can't tell you how it was done, but yeah, I don't buy it. Jazz says, what about tiny marbles? That would only work on a perfectly flat, hard surface. Nicholas says, I think you're underestimating how much weight soil can hold. No, I think you're underestimating how heavy 1,000 tons is. 1,000 tons with wooden rollers on top. They are going to get, one of two things is going to happen, or probably both things. Those rollers are going to get squashed down into the earth. Simple. And if the earth is sufficiently firm underneath, they're going to get partially squashed down into the earth, and then the rollers themselves are going to collapse under the weight. That's what's going to happen. Moving something that size 2 miles up and down hills? I mean, if you had a perfectly flat surface made out of concrete or something, that alone would be difficult enough. But then you're moving these blocks up and over hills. I mean, it's totally ridiculous. However many men you need to move it over a flat surface, what? You'd have to double or triple it, moving the blocks up a hill. The whole thing is nonsense, man. I don't know why people are so desperate to believe this, wooden rollers theory, because it's just so to me, it's just so blatantly ridiculous. That is why, even on Wikipedia, even on mainstream sites, they don't hang their hat on the roller theory. They put it out there as, oh, maybe it was rollers, or maybe it was this, or maybe it was that. They don't hang their hat on it because they know it's ridiculous. So they can't hang their hat on it. They can try it with a block half of that size, a quarter that size. Scale the number of rollers down, see what happens. And this was being done all over the world. This was being done in the Americas. And Circle says the Baalbek stones were moved 600 meters apparently. No, they were moved well over a mile. There's a quarry. In fact, there might be 2 quarries. But I've looked on Google Earth. You can actually measure the distance. Like I said, Niklaus, if it can be done, prove it with experiment. Because I don't think it can be done. And Circle says, according to what I found, the quarry the 1,000-ton block came from was 0.37 miles, so 600 meters. No, it's much further away than that. I've looked into the Baalbek thing a lot, and it was well over a mile, more like 2 miles. And I've even looked on Google Earth. But there may have been separate quarries. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are a couple of different quarries. It's in the Lebanon. And the stones, the enormous megalithic stones, which are in the base of something called the Temple of Jupiter, vary in size from about, I think the smallest one might be 700 or 800 tons. The largest one wasn't actually moved. It was abandoned. The largest one was over 1,000 tons. The largest one might have been 1,200 tons or something like that off the top of my head. Mark says 1 ton elephant to pull it. See, I like what Bottler's saying there. They would obviously have used stone rollers and have a stegosaurus pull the stone rollers. Yeah, like the Flintstones or something. You know, one of the things that always fascinates me is the fear that people have of the unknown. That's always fascinated me. A lot of people are terrified of the unknown. And this is why dogma is so ubiquitous among human beings. Most human beings love dogma. Because dogma takes away their fear of the unknown. Whether it's scientific dogma, there shouldn't be any dogma in science, but there is. It's full of dogma. Religious dogma, and various other dogmas. People are terrified of the unknown. They want certainty. They hate things being open-ended and mysterious and questions going unanswered. They hate that. And that's always fascinated me. It's like a few lives back, there was a guy in the chat, I forget who, the guy using a Japanese name, some kind of Oriental name. Shout out to him if he's listening. But he expressed how frightened he was of death. And so he's always going to the doctors for checkups and all this kind of business. And he was absolutely like terrified of no longer being here. And I said to him, you know, I don't go to the doctors. I ain't been to doctors since, the last time I went to the doctors was maybe 15 years ago or something. I don't do checkups or anything like that. And he's like, oh, what if something happens? What? And I said, if it's my time to go, it's my time to go. It's not that deep, bro. It's not that deep. We're all going to die one day. You know? Nobody can escape it. For me, obviously I wouldn't want to die a violent death, but I'm intrigued at what lies beyond. I'm not scared. I'm intrigued. Maybe we'll find out something about this reality once we cross over to the other side. Maybe we will, or maybe we won't. Maybe it's just oblivion. Like the atheists tell us, right? They tell us it's all just oblivion, you won't know anything. Then again, maybe it's not oblivion. Maybe there is something beyond. Isn't necessarily what religious people tell us is beyond. We will all find out one day, unless there are people walking this earth who are empty vessels, who don't actually have any form of sentience, but they're more like biological robots, like we imagine an insect to be. We imagine, I don't know whether this can be proved, I suspect it can't, but we imagine the insects are not sentient, at least not anywhere near to the extent of mammals. So they're basically biological robots. What if some humans are like that? They're just empty vessels. Either there's no sentience in there or a very, very low level of sentience. Big up James Clifford for the super chat. He says, this conversation is getting heavy tonight. Get the likes up. This conversation is making me want to look up Graham Hancock and Göbekli Tepe. Big up James Clifford every time. Yeah, shout out to Graham Hancock too. Okay, I think this tab has crashed, but because YouTube is doing all sorts of skitsing out, oh, come on, YouTube, man. I'm trying to refresh this, but YouTube is really misbehaving today. I can't even get back into the live thing. Oh my God. Bear with me, people. I'm waiting for YouTube to un-F itself, because I'm going to my channel content page where I would normally go to access a live, and it's saying unable to load videos. YouTube gets glitchy like this sometimes. You'll sign in and all the videos are not there. Okay, I finally got in. Here we go. Glitchy as hell, YouTube, man. But where is the live chat? I'm back into the live stream page, but there's no live chat. Come on, YouTube, man. You're killing me tonight. Okay, here we go. We're back. But hang on. The live chat's still not there. I've got the super chat window open, but oh my gosh. What is going on? YouTube, man, being sabotaged. Maybe it's some disgruntled atheists flagging the stream. I don't know. And by the way, I always mention atheists in a certain tone because they're far more similar to the religious people they mock than they would have you believe. That's the ironic thing about it, right? I'm not saying all atheists, but the majority of them that I've come across in my lifetime. And I used to identify myself as an atheist when I was growing up. When I was maybe from my teen years through to maybe late 20s, I was saying, okay, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in any of that stuff. It's all nonsense. Yeah, right now, folks, I wish I could show you what's on my screen. I do not have any access to the live chat. Okay, finally it's back. Oh my gosh, finally it's back. All right. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. YouTube is on some BS today. Rusby says, not scared of death and wouldn't be bothered if I had a little time left, but wouldn't want to be terminally ill and rot slowly. That's why I do the very odd checkup just to see all is okay. Well, the terminal illness is slow when you try and treat it. If you don't try and treat it, you'll be out of it pretty quick. Depending on what the depending on what the illness is. Yeah? You got a terminal illness. This is untreated. It's the treatment that's going to prolong it. That's why I said it depends on what the illness is encircled. Many terminal illnesses, if you just leave them with no treatment, you'll be out of here quick. Mark Hatch says, do you believe in manifesting, Hatman? Well, I'm open to the possibility that there's something to it. The idea of manifesting is that we have some type of influence over our reality, such that if we think in a certain way, and even if we conduct certain rituals or however you want to describe it, we can bend reality in our favor. Even our thoughts, so on and so forth. And again, this really ties all into simulation theory. Yeah, it ties very much into simulation theory. I mean, when we say simulation, this would be a simulation far more advanced and complex than anything we can create in video games. And the rules of it and the parameters of it, again, will be potentially far more complex than we can conceptualize. Let Me Age says, I love existing, so I hope this isn't the end. Well, if it is the end, then there's only oblivion beyond this life. You won't know any different. So what is there to fear? Do you know what I mean? In fact, in a live that I did several months ago, I said that my biggest fear is that reincarnation is real. That's actually my biggest fear. That reincarnation is real and it's random. You know, that you reincarnate as, I don't know, an animal, a different person. That is my biggest fear. To hell with reincarnation, bro. Imagine if you reincarnated as a kid that was born into some type of sex slavery in some, you know, very, very poor and dangerous part of the world. You know? Imagine all the things that you could reincarnate as, bro. Nah, I'm good with one go around on this reality. I hope reincarnation is not real. Unless you can choose who you want to be, then it might be good. But if it's just a random thing where you can't choose, nah, bro. I'm not up for reincarnation. Miss me with that. What if you reincarnated as an insect, a small mammal, you know? Fernie G says, but you didn't get to choose this life, Hatman. As far as we don't know. If we've lived before, we don't know whether we got to choose these lives. We don't know. We're clueless, right? We're all blind as far as where we come from, where our consciousness comes from before this life and where it goes to afterwards, if it goes anywhere. We're all blind, guessing. So yeah, reincarnation is a thing that actually, as in random lottery reincarnation, where you don't get to choose who you want to be. That's scary. And logically, you would assume that it is random, because who the hell would choose to be like a kid born crippled in some slum in Afghanistan? You know what I mean? Who would choose that life? Nick Klaus says, well, it would be based on karma, right? Would it? I mean, that's one theory, right? In the Eastern spiritual traditions, that this karma thing, that's one theory. I remember there was a England manager, Hoddle. What was his name? Is it Graham Hoddle? He's Graham, right? He actually got sacked because he suggested that disabled people were evil in a previous life. Glenn Hoddle. Yeah, he's because he had this spiritual advisor. I forget what her name was. This was, I want to say, in the late 90s. And Glenn Hoddle suggested in some interview that disabled people had obviously done something bad in a previous life. And they sacked him over that. No, it weren't Mystic Meg. It was somebody else. Yeah. And Circle says, so there's a crippled Adolf Hitler somewhere amongst us. Well, according to Glenn Hoddle's belief, JM says, Randall Carlson says ancients could have had plasmoid unification tech, which is vibrating atoms at their resonant frequencies. This could have been used to move massive objects. Mazda is testing it now. Yeah, Randall Carlson's an interesting individual. Identifies himself as a Freemason. He's done a lot of very, very interesting work with regards to this hypothesized comet impact on the North American ice cap, like whenever it was 12,000 years ago. He's a colleague of Graham Hancock, and they've been on Joe Rogan together a bunch of times. Randall Carlson's definitely a very learned man. He knows a lot of stuff. Doesn't mean he's right about everything, but worth a listen to his ideas, I think. That is, yes, that's correct. Linkage must have looked it up because I know you're too young to remember. Eileen Drury. That's the woman's name. Eileen Drury. There you go. Shola says Hodder was actually a good manager. What could have been? Yeah, he was. England were playing pretty well from what I can remember it. No, from what I can remember under Glenn Hoddle. Yeah, he was pretty good. If we could all stick a like on this stream, it'll be much appreciated. Ladies and gents. 186 concurrent viewers, only 61 likes. If we can get it up to like 90 likes, thank you in advance. Like 30 likes more. Well, the thing about Islamic hell is that, and I'm no Islamic scholar here, you can actually ascend out of hell. You can escape hell. I guess by behaving yourself or whatever the case may be, suffering for long enough, you can escape. Is that the case with Christian hell as well, or Christian hell you're finished? Finish and clar. There's no escaping. Kyle says Christian hell is worse. Oh yeah, Dante's Inferno. Striker says, nah man, Christian hell you ain't escaping. JM says, but to go back to your previous point, simulation theory could definitely be a real thing. Earth might even be an experiment planet for another life form, of course. All of this stuff is possible, right? Simulation theory is very much possible. Doesn't mean it's true, but I don't see why it's not possible. I don't see why it's not possible at all from a logical perspective. Fight Talk says there is no hell. How do you know? Have you died and gone to the other side to have a look? Jazz says, do agnostics go to Christian hell? Well, I'll find out, right? I'm an agnostic. When I pass over to the other side, I'll find out. Unfortunately, I probably won't be able to report back and tell you what's there. And that's a good comment there from JM. He says, look at the virtual reality movement now. It won't take long before VR is indistinguishable from real life, and then it really will be the Matrix. And that's why the Matrix movies are so profound. Because they explore the nature of reality. You know, in that great scene where Morpheus is giving Neo the lowdown on what the Matrix is. And Neo says to Morpheus, this isn't real? And Morpheus is like, what is real? Reality that you see all around you is just electrical signals interpreted by your brain. So, yeah, you make a good point. The Lawnmower Man, oh yeah, 1990s, I want to say. They're remaking that, The Lawnmower Man. There's a remake coming. We were speaking about movies earlier on and remakes. Yeah, they're doing a remake of The Lawnmower Man in all its neon glory. Yeah, we spoke about that at the top of the show. KST the Great, Rampage Jackson's son. Dog Boone says, The Matrix said the 90s is the peak of human civilization. I agree. It definitely felt like it. It definitely felt like it. But I also have to consider the fact that the rose-tinted glasses, the nostalgia and so on for the 90s is a real thing as well, you know? And it all depends on where you're at in your life. There are some people alive right now who are having an amazing time of it. They've had very few challenges in their lives. It's all been uphill, fantastic. And they love everything. They love the music. They love the vibe. You know, everything's on the up and up for them in their little bubble. And so they're going to think the world's great when really they're just in their little bubble. Do you know what I mean? Now, I certainly wasn't in any kind of little bubble in the 90s. But when you look at like media, for example, when I say media, I'm talking about music, film, television, etc. In my view, it was much better in the 90s than it is now. So in terms of the arts, I should call it the arts. In terms of the arts, it was better in the 90s than now, from my perspective. But maybe there are these young people out here now who totally disagree with that. And they think that it's way better today in terms of the arts. Shout out to Copzilla for the super chat. He says, Morpheus says famously, welcome to the desert. Yeah, he says, welcome to the desert of the real. The desert of the real. Shout out to Copzilla. Yeah, I agree with Dog Boone that 911 was a watershed moment. That the vibe of everything just seemed to go downhill after 911. Absolutely it did. Absolutely it did, yeah. The vibe of everything. Because I remember the turn of the millennium very well. Where I was, I was out with me and two of my brothers in Leicester Square on December 31st, 1999. So I remember the whole mood of the time. And it was excitement because there was all this Y2K nonsense, right? Which I never bought into, this idea that there was going to be a computer glitch and all the computers were going to get wiped. Talking about this Y2K glitch. It was really just the latest hysteria surrounding the turn of a millennium. Because if you look through history, people get hysterical every time they turn a new millennium. People get hysterical. So it wasn't that bad, to be honest. People weren't getting that hysterical about it. It was more just like media hype. Most people were kind of puzzled by it. But that aside, the late 90s were a very the way I experienced them and remember them, a very optimistic time. Everybody felt, or my perception anyway, and I certainly felt optimistic. That was the vibe. Television programs were optimistic. The music people were making was optimistic. It was just a very optimistic time, and there was excitement to see what the new millennium would hold. I think most people felt that way. That's my perception anyway. But yeah, when 9/11 happened, it all just messed everything up, and the whole vibe changed overnight. And things were never the same after that. Carpen says, Blair created optimism, to be fair. Only for about 5 minutes. Only for about 5 minutes during his election campaign, he created optimism. The optimism was not created by Blair. He basically rode that wave, within politics. People weren't really that interested in politics, among the young anyway at that stage. People were turning their backs on politics, There'd been Maggie Thatcher. After Maggie Thatcher had gone, you had John Major. And in retrospect, John Major was one of the least offensive prime ministers that Britain's had in my lifetime. Because John Major, who's actually from Brixton, by the way. Just a bit of trivia there. John Major's from Brixton. In the Major years, I don't know, the media in the UK used to mock John Major for how dull he was. Yeah, he was characterized as being this very boring man. Well, boring is good when it comes to prime ministers. Do you know what I mean? It's like the way I see prime ministers and even presidents and whatnot is the less interfering they do, for the most part, the better. Kind of like a referee in boxing. When you get a really fussy referee who's pedantic and everything, it kind of ruins the boxing match. Yeah, similar thing, not in all cases, because, in some countries, things are so bad, somebody really needs to go in there like a bulldozer and sort things out. But in the 90s in Britain, yeah, there were certain things that needed sorting out. But normally when politicians talk about sorting things out, it's sorting things out for the worst. I mean, for example, since Keir Starmer took over, all I'm seeing online is people getting stung left, right, and center with, like extra parking fines and all kinds of extremely cynical practices that the government, and I'm not into left-right politics, folks, just to put it out there, but Labour councils are apparently doing, changing roads and parking things and this, that, and the other in a very sneaky way because they want money from fining people. I mean, this has been a practice that politicians have been doing for God knows what, centuries. So when they say changing things, I mean, for all my life, the Blackwall Tunnel was free to pass through. Now they charge for it, right? They charge for the Blackwall Tunnel. I mean, it's like, yo, they're trying to charge you for breathing. There you go, Star Fox. He said, I got stung by a sneaky parking sign 2 weeks ago. And they make them deliberately sneaky because they want people to get caught. That's what they want, so they can get up some revenue. It's so cynical. It's diabolical. It's flipping diabolical. You know, in the third world, in developing nations, there's a lot of bribery that goes on, right? Police demand money off you and this, that, and the other goes on. And so when you're raised in the West, you think, well, that's terrible. And it is terrible. But guess what? All of that kind of extortion is done in the West as well. It's just done through officialdom, right? Rather than it being one or two or, individual corrupt cops who are trying to extort motorists, it's done at the municipal level in the West. It's your local council. It's not going to be some corrupt cop pulling you over and, trying to get 50 quid out of you. It's going to be some camera somewhere with a tiny sign next to it that you can barely see if you're driving past it. And then you don't realize that you went down a road, which is a residential street, but the top of the road, you're not allowed to go up and down it anymore because they've introduced some ridiculous rule. High taxes, indeed. Yeah, they just do it legally in the West. They extort you all the same, bro. They just do it legally. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, with the Kenya, one of the passport bros beat up a Kenyan woman on live and it raised the whole debate online of behavior overseas. Okay. That seems like a bit of a nothing burger to me, to be honest, because one incident like that and what all passport bros are beating up women. I'm just going to be real with you. In Africa, and it's not just Africa, it's many parts of the world, right? Including Eastern Europe and Asia. Domestic violence is something which police turn a blind eye to in many countries around the world. And I'm going to say, I've never been to Kenya, but from what I've been told, it's very similar there. So whether it's a passport bro doing it or a local guy doing it, it's turned a blind eye to. So it's kind of a drop in the ocean for a passport bro to do that in Africa. Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. In many parts of Africa, I don't know whether perhaps it is changing in certain countries in Africa, but in many countries in Africa, domestic violence is not taken seriously by the police. They'll say that's a domestic matter, that's nothing to do with us. It's a married couple or, people living together. We're not going to get involved. And it used to be like that in Britain until maybe the 60s, Up until the 60s, the women's lib thing in Britain, it was the same. Domestic disputes were left alone by the police for the most part. There you go. John Joe says, that's true, Hatman. Spain not long gone through these cultural changes, less tolerant of domestic offenses. Yeah, and of course, Spain was a dictatorship up until, when was it, the 70s? So, democracy, as we think of it today, whatever you think of democracy, is a very new thing in Spain. It only came in, like I said, I think it was the 70s. Shout out to Chainsaw. Big up KO Kid Boxing. What was the name of the last Spanish dictator? I forget his name. I'm sure somebody's going to look it up now in a search engine. Chainsaw says, watched that Tenet the other day, no idea what was going on. That's right, Franco. And he died, right? In office. Did he die in office? And then after that, they moved to a democratic system? Yeah, Tenet scrambled my brain as well the first time I watched it. Maybe the first 2 times I watched it, but I kept watching it and kept watching it, and eventually I was like, okay. And that's one of the reasons I like Chris Nolan films so much, especially the sci-fi films, because there's so much rewatch value. You notice different things on each watch through. That's an interesting one. Carlos says, who is your favorite dictator of all time? In terms of banter, yeah, is Idi Amin. In terms of banter. I'm not saying he was a good guy or anything like that. I'm just saying in terms of his interviews and the bants, Idi Amin stands alone. He was hilarious. That's right, Idi Amin Dada. he was hilarious, bro. Samil says, wasn't Idi Amin a boxer too? Apparently, but Idi Amin almost certainly embellished his story. Because if you go to like Idi Amin's Wikipedia page, for example, the amount of achievements that is claimed by him, it's like, this guy must have been one of the most talented people in history. You know what I mean? Because I'm sure a lot of that stuff is massively embellished, because obviously he took over Uganda in a military coup. And so he controlled everything, and he could have falsified records and done whatever he wanted to do. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah, supposedly he was a boxer, a very good boxer, also a champion swimmer. But I saw a video of him racing some of his servants or security or whoever they were, and his swimming looked terrible. It's like the guys he was swimming against were scared to win. They let him win. You know them ones. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, Kagame was the most effective, in my opinion, in Africa. What do you think of him? Is Kagame the Rwandan one? Is that the president of Rwanda? Shola says, yes, okay, the Rwandan one. Well, I don't know as much about Rwanda as I do about Uganda. What I can tell you is Congolese people are always saying that Kagame is basically the devil. So, I don't know, bro. I can't really say one way or the other about Kagame because, yeah, Congolese people are always complaining about how awful and evil Kagame and the Rwandan government are. So, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know enough about it to make a judgment on it. Matt says, is Africa becoming a failed experiment or more of a still in progress country? Okay, you corrected it and said continent. Well, Africa's not an experiment. It's a very large continent with many different tribes and what have you, which is still recovering. And it isn't really recover. It's trying to recover from the colonial scramble, which massively negatively impacted African society in many ways. Now, of course, there was infrastructure and stuff like that built, but it's the social order that was scrambled. And it's going to take a long time for that to be rectified, especially when you've still got countries from around the world dipping their hands into the pot, which is African resources. And they're obviously going to get involved in the political side of things in order to continue to access those resources. The last time you had real powerful nations in Africa that were a player on the global stage was during the Middle Ages. So during the Middle Ages, you had the Mali Empire, which was very powerful on the global stage. If you go back further than that, a little bit further, you had the Aksumite Empire of Ethiopia, which was very powerful on the global stage. But yeah, since that time, tribalism combined with, which has been agitated by colonialism by the Arabs, Europeans, and these days it's not really colonialism by force by the Chinese and the Russians, but I guess you could say opportunistically. All of these things make it difficult for the continent to rise. You know, if Africa didn't have all those resources, ironically, it would probably be doing better, to be honest. Because all the because it's so resource rich. Yeah, there's a scramble for, especially now, you know, especially now, such a scramble for the resources there. Shout out to G, the PT, says, bless Hatman, did you ever play the God of War series? Yes, I played a little bit of God of War 2, but I didn't play it at the time when it came out. I tried to play it, I think the remastered version I tried to play, but I just couldn't get into it because it just looked so dated, truth be told. The first God of War I played was God of War 3, and I loved it. Still love God of War 3 now. Indeed, Libya was doing pretty good before 2011, and yeah. I mean, civilizations rise and fall. Look at Iraq. Iraq used to be Babylon, used to be Mesopotamia, right? Iraq at one point was one of, if not the most powerful nation in the world back when it was, you know, Sumeria, Mesopotamia and whatnot. It was like the one of the main seats of civilization and global power was Iraq. Look at Iraq now. Iraq is basically a third world country now. I mean, Egypt is a third world country, right? Egypt, same with Egypt. It used to be powerful, strong and mighty, and now it's not so powerful, strong and mighty. Same goes for Sudan when it was Nubia. The Kush, the kingdom of Kush, it was very powerful then, but now it's an absolute mess. Shout out to Debiaka, he's out. Regular says Kingdom of Kush. Yes, Kush. In East Africa, in what is today Sudan. It may have encompassed at one point southern Egypt as well. and large parts of Sudan. And even maybe, did it encroach at one point the full extent of its size into Ethiopia? It may have done. Because these things, you know, kingdoms, empires, they grow and shrink. Regular says I'm a Kush expert. Well, not that kind of Kush. Not that kind of Kush. AJ says, I've heard people dispute the existence of Kush or if it was anything special or interesting. Okay, that's bizarre because it's very well documented and it absolutely existed. And you're basically talking about the Nubian civilization. That is what would become Kush, right? So we know the Nubians had a civilization. They were basically the cousins of the ancient Egyptians. Very similar culture, similar deities. They also built pyramids and temples and all that kind of stuff. And that would then become the kingdom of Kush or the empire of Kush, however you want to describe it. Could username says, yes, Kush was also in southern Egypt, referred to as Upper Egypt. Make it make sense. Well, that's to do with the topography. Because southern Egypt is a higher altitude than northern Egypt. That's why they call southern Egypt Upper Egypt, because it's at higher altitude. Because you imagine the river Nile flows downhill, as rivers do, as it then reaches the Nile Delta and then into the sea. So that's why, again, it is confusing, but that's why they call southern Egypt Upper Egypt and northern Egypt Lower Egypt, because it's to do with the elevation. East Midlands Fight Fan says, well, the Nubians a tribe? No, the Nubians... see, this term Nubians is an umbrella term. There were many different Nubians. The Nubians still exist today, although they're different today than in the ancient world. In the ancient world, Nubians were Nilotic people. Nilotic are a particular phenotype of Africans that are extremely tall and extremely dark, hairless. And the ancient Nubians were like that. But modern Nubians, and there are many Nubian tribes still around today in Sudan. You look it up online, you'll find the names of the different Nubian tribes. The Nubians today, many of them are mixed with Arab. So they don't look the same as the ancient Nubians look. So it's more like I guess you could describe Nubians as like a cultural group that contains different tribes within them. Shout out to Kayvon Green. Have I heard of the Silurian hypothesis thought experiment? No, explain it to me. Encircled says, how do you think AJ versus Atama would go now? I think Atama would knock him out maybe inside 5 rounds. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. East Midlands Fight Fan says, is AJ still with Ben Davison? I don't know for certain, but Ben Davison hasn't, and neither of them, as far as I'm aware, they haven't communicated that they've split. So if they have split, you would have thought we'd have heard something by now. Shout out to D-Man, he says, could you see the balkanization of Europe in the future with the current fast demographic changes? That's an interesting question. If something like that were to happen, I think it would be very, very far in the future. I don't think it would be something in our lifetimes. I think it'd be very far in the future. Because balkanization normally happens when you have, or off the back of, severe conflict. So, how are you going to have severe conflict in the UK when the citizens are not armed? I think that kind of thing is more possible in the United States, but in the UK, I don't know. I mean, look, I'm not a fortune teller here. I'm not Nostradamus, but I don't see unarmed European nations. When I say unarmed, I'm talking about the citizens fighting against each other to the point where you have balkanization. Yeah, Sudan's got a mixture of people today. In the ancient world, it was less mixed. It was more predominantly Nilotic people. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. It says, watching Children of Men years ago left an impression on me. Great movie. Yeah, that's starring Clive Owen. Children of Men. It is a good movie. It's like a... Could I call it post-apocalyptic? Yeah, I guess so. Post-apocalyptic sci-fi movie. It's a good film. Agni says he went to Carnival on Monday and daggered 9 women. Is that right? Carnival was yesterday? You managed to smash 9 women in a day? That's crazy, bro. I'm not sure I believe you. K1 Green says, basically, there could have been other intelligent life before man, but because it was so long ago, we would not be able to detect that they ever existed. Okay, yeah, that's another, as far as I'm concerned, perfectly plausible idea, that there may have been intelligent life forms long before mankind, but because it was so long ago, any trace of them has been destroyed, or whatever the case may be, by the elements, you know? Yeah? I mean, how do we know that that's not the case when we're talking about these vast expanses of time? So I'm very much open to that idea. Yeah? It could have been in the, deep, deep, deep billions of years ago, another advanced species that reached a level of advancement similar to ours or greater, that were wiped out maybe by a cataclysm, a comet, or various earth changes, and now there's no trace that they ever existed. Yeah, why not? Chainsaw says that's what Graham Hancock basically talks about. Well, no, Graham Hancock believes that, yeah, we're a species with amnesia, but he's not going that far back. He's only going back 12,000 years. And he says, in his theory, there was a civilization that was seafaring and was maybe something similar to like Victorian England in their level of technology. So they were not more advanced than us today, according to Graham Hancock's theory. They were just like Victorian era technologically advanced, but 12,000 years ago. Shout out to Agni, says, the dance move, okay. You're just talking about the dance move and not actually. All right. So what kind of stages they got at Carnival now? Is it still like radio? I've got their own sound systems and whatnot, or I don't know how it works at Carnival. I ain't been Carnival for years. Big up Strangingness. Jay says, daggered means the woman whined on him, not smashed him, Hatman. No, it means the woman got smashed. That's what daggering means, bro. Think about what dagger is a euphemism for. Now, people may use it in the dancing sense as well, but its original meaning is literally penetration, bro. That's what the dagger is, a euphemism for the Johnson. It's an old school term, bro. That's not new. I've had Jamaican girls tell me they want daggering. Sazad says, Hatman, how many steps do you walk a day on average? I got no idea. Absolutely no idea. 0. So there you go, East Midlands fight fan. He knows. She got daggered as an old school thing my granddad would say. Yeah. The dagger is a euphemism. I mean, sometimes I use a similar euphemism. When I'm talking about, let's say, a girl and the type of man she wants a man who's a master swordsman. You know, like that. So that's the euphemism I'll use, master swordsman. Anthony YouTube says, can't be in your 30s still going Carnival. It's a different day and time now. Oh, shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, did you know Antarctica was once tropical? Yes, so they say. They say there's loads of coal in Antarctica, right? Which, if coal is made in the way we're told it's made, right, by organic matter being compressed by layers and layers of sediment and whatnot, then yeah, there must have been trees and all sorts of stuff down there at one point. Was there a pole shift, or who knows? Jaden says, Jamaican gal too dead and rude. Kayvon Green says, which island has the prettiest girls? I say Trinidad. Well, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but for me, Bayesian girls would be, I haven't visited every Caribbean island, but the countries I've been to, I put Bayesian girls at the top. So, the Notting Hill Carnival, which is the carnival that people are referring to here, was started by Caribbean immigrants, actually Trinidadian. I want to say it was Trinidadian immigrants. And it grew and grew and grew to the point where now it's like encompassing everyone in the black community from every country, Africa, everywhere. And people from many other communities and countries attend it as well. And they have their food stalls. So you'll see like South American food there now. Back in the days, you'd only see Caribbean food being sold. Then you started seeing African food being sold. And now it's like South American, African, all sorts of food is sold there now. Cal says carnival is nasty. I agree. And back in the days, like in the early decades of carnival, it was very much a cultural thing. It was about the traditional Caribbean music, soca, which is from Trinidad and Tobago and whatnot. It was about those kind of things, and it was really a family vibe. But the longer it's gone on, it's become less about, I know they've introduced these different days, right? At one point they said, okay, Saturday is kids' day, then Sunday's family day, or however they did it. But I remember when I think Monday was originally the kids' day. I remember they swapped the days around anyway, because they made a day for kids, yeah? And what happened was the adults who didn't want to be around any riffraff would go on the kids' day. And even a lot of girls who didn't want to be around trouble would go on the kids' day. But then the riffraff realized that the adult day was dead now because people were going on kids' day instead. So all the riffraff started going on kids' day. I remember there was a point where that happened. But yeah, carnival's nasty. Chainsaw says, why does it keep attracting violence? Well, you've got over 1 million people in one place. There are going to be violent incidents, you know? And also people from gangs from various parts of London use carnival as like, you know, like the way football hooligans would meet up after a match, rival firms, you know, if West Ham were going to play Millwall or whoever, they'd use that as a battleground to settle their beefs. Similar thing with carnival, like gangs from different parts of London on carnival weekend, they'll converge there and look for their enemies and stuff like that. Sazad says, maybe carnival is all the same and we've just gotten older. Well, I want to say that carnival in the 90s was more dangerous than it is now because there was guns, a lot more guns in the 90s. It was more dangerous in terms of more violent incidents, but there was still more of the Caribbean cultural vibe, which was what it was originally predicated on. Whereas now carnival is very commercialized. Do you know what I mean? It's just a place for people to make money, selling their food and this, that, and the other. It's much more commercialized now because of the size of it. They tried to move carnival at one stage. In fact, one of the years they might have moved it. I'm not sure. Because obviously residents of Notting Hill have been complaining for years. Because carnival is dirty, bro. If you've got 1 million people all in a relatively small area, sometimes over 1 million people, the amount of rubbish and just nastiness, obviously people urinating everywhere, it's nasty. It's definitely nasty. Ali says, Hatman, were you a Millwall fan? South London guy? No, I've never been a fan of any football club. I've never really been into football like that. Are football firms still a thing? Do football firms even exist anymore? I've got no idea. A shout out to Agni for the super chat. He says, a man received head on the kid's day in daylight. See, that don't surprise me. And that's the kind of nastiness I don't want to be seeing. Indeed, indecent exposure. That's nasty. Regular says, unfortunately, I don't know whether a civil war is wanted or not. A civil war how? How could there be a civil war in the UK? With knives? It's not much of a war, is it? Not even swords. Kitchen knives. Afro Soul says, Hatman, have you ever heard of the FBA movement? If so, what do you think of it? Yes. Foundational Black Americans. All I can tell you is that black people love to subdivide themselves into an increasing number of groups. And the whole FBA thing is one of the latest examples of it. So foundational Black Americans are distancing themselves from black people from any other part of the world, basically. They're distinguishing themselves. We're not the same as Caribbeans. We're not the same as Afro-Latinos. We're not the same as Africans. We're not the same as Black British. We're not the same. Yeah. And this is something which I don't think it's just been manipulated by COINTELPRO or the government. This is something black people like to do, bro. Even in Africa. You know, that's why Africa got so many tribes. Black people love to divide more than bacteria, you know, cell cultures. More than any other group, black people love to divide. They love to find reasons to separate from each other and have beefs with each other. In Circle says it's something people do in general. It is, but it's more acute and more intense among black people for some reason. And it isn't just in Africa. It's even black people outside of Africa behave like that. They have this just insatiable need to subdivide into more and more groups. I mean, Africa as a continent makes up for what? 15% of the world population? 15%, right? Of the world's population is in Africa. Something like that, right? But it accounts for something like 60% of the world's tribes. Think about that. The continent with 15% of the world's population has 60% of the world's tribes. That's how crazy tribalism is in Africa, bro. Africans, black people love to divide into groups all day long. They love it. Yeah, Asia makes up 61% of the population. Yeah, Asia's massive. I mean, think about the two countries with the biggest populations in the world are both in Asia, right? China and India. I mean, China and India, that's just one country each. There's more people in India or in China than in the entire African continent. So, yeah. They're very busy there, aren't they, in India? Like, yo. And think about this. This is something I should point out. Those countries, India and China, particularly India, still very much have the nuclear family intact. And where you have a nuclear family intact, you tend to get a lot of breeding going on. Yeah. Yeah, apparently Africa is the fastest growing population-wise, but Africa would have to do an awful lot of catching up to reach the level of Asia, you know? Yeah, they're going at it. They're going at it in India. They're going at it, bro. Must be all those romantic Bollywood movies inspiring them, you know? Carl says India is a huge country. It's a big country, but it's not anywhere near the size of the African continent. Not even close. But yeah, it's got over 1 billion people. So them Indian man, when they shoot, they don't miss. You know what that's a euphemism for? Black Incel Speak says, pause. And them Indian man and the Chinese, them Chinese man, they don't miss. They're hitting the target. Marksman, there you go. A marksman. Yeah, East Midlands Fight Fan says Russia is underpopulated. That's right. Russia is literally empty. What's the population of Russia? 120 million? And it's the largest country in the world, right? Spans from Eastern Europe all the way across Asia. Massive. Barely anyone in it. But how much of Russia being underpopulated has to do with the harshness of the environment? You know? Maybe it's as practical as that. Well, yeah, Afro Soul just said it there. Yes, most of Russia is uninhabitable. It's a very harsh environment in much of Russia. So Ali makes a point there. He says, the entirety of North Africa is uninhabitable. Egypt is 99% empty, yet the population there is 100 million plus. But the difference is that Egypt is at a junction point with Asia and Europe. So that area right there has always had a lot of migration in and out. And, you know, there are large population centers just across the Med. You know what I mean? Where it is habitable. Whereas in the outback of Russia, who's going to be migrating there? You know what I mean? As Danny said it there, the Nile River makes it habitable. Whereas in the Russian tundra, who's going to be living there? I mean, there are some people that live out there, but not many, you know? Tribes people and stuff like that. I think Ruslan Provodnikov is from a certain ethnic group that's from out in the wilderness in Russia. And they all look like that, you know, they have those kind of almost Eskimo type faces and whatever. Yeah. And the conditions are extremely harsh. Yeah, like Siberia and whatnot, yeah. So again, speaking of reincarnation, going back to what we were talking about earlier on in the stream, imagine being reincarnated as some like poor tribes person in Siberia. You want to be reincarnated there? Living in the Russian tundra in crippling poverty, 25 degrees below in the winter if you're lucky. How's that for a reincarnation journey? Shout out to George for the super chat. He says, a response to your claim that AJ is shot. AJ is in his physical prime. Mentally, though, he can't seem to put it together. I agree he should retire. Yeah, and the mind controls the body. I mean, AJ physically does look okay. You know, he doesn't seem to have any issues with his mobility, moving around. His legs don't look super slow or anything like that. It still looks like he has his coordination. He still speaks okay. But it's, yeah, more mentally he's shot. He looks shell-shocked. That's an old term for, I guess, post-traumatic stress disorder. He looks shell-shocked, AJ. His eyes don't look right. The first time I noticed it was on the ring walk ahead of the first Andy Ruiz fight. And his eyes have never been the same since. He's got this scared look in his eyes. Even in the Ngannou fight. In the Wallin fight, I didn't notice it too much. But actually, maybe it was there at one point in the Wallin. I forget if it was the Wallin fight or the Ngannou fight, because one of the commentators noted that AJ looks nervous in the corner. But yeah, ever since that first Ruiz fight, when he walked to the ring, his eyes have never looked the same since. D-Man says there is a large expat community in Kenya and Tanzania. Yeah, particularly Kenya. If you're talking about European or expats from Europe, not necessarily European racially, but expats from Europe in Kenya. Oh yeah, Kenya's big for that. Because Kenya is, by African standards, pretty well developed. I mean, it's up there among the most developed countries in Africa, next to South Africa's more developed. Parts of Egypt are quite developed. Well developed. But Kenya's, I don't know, top 10 in Africa in terms of development. So that obviously attracts a lot of people from the West who want to live in Africa. They go to a place like Kenya because it's a lot safer than South Africa. It's not as well developed as South Africa is, but it's a lot safer than South Africa. D-Man says, I agree. I noticed the eyes. Yeah, AJ's eyes ain't been the same. His eyes ain't been the same since that Ruiz fight. They have not been the same. Afro Soul says, you couldn't pay me to live in South Africa. Me neither. South Africa's a mess. They've got some nice things there. And I might even visit South Africa for a week or something. But in terms of living there, hell no. I ain't gonna live in no South Africa. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, I was honestly shocked at the state of Cairo. It was really like a dystopian city. Well, Cairo's enormous, and indeed you do have extreme poverty, but also extreme wealth. But there are other parts of Egypt outside, away from the capital, which are much nicer, more habitable, more hospitable places to live. But yeah, Cairo is a massive, dirty, you know, very busy place. Afro Soul says, I have Ghanaian relatives there who moved there and had to leave after a few months because of the horrors they went through with xenophobia and crimes from SA blacks there. Yeah. Yeah, the xenophobia in South Africa is out of control. Yeah, Chainsaw says they were massaging his neck before Ruiz won, and he was messing with the gum shield. Indeed. It just didn't look right. Everybody noticed it. AJ did not look right before that fight. It's almost as if he knew he was going to lose. Do you know what I mean? It's almost as if he sensed they weren't going to be his night before it happened. And I think many of us have had experiences like that. When we sense something before it happens. Kyle says, my auntie got robbed in South Africa the first day she was in the country. D-Man says, Cairo made Nairobi, Kenya look like Singapore. But to be fair, you know, Cairo is massive. What's the population of Cairo? Like 15 million? It's massive. King KO says the carjacking in South Africa is crazy. D-Man says there's a strong correlation between inequality and crime. Brazil and South Africa are prime examples. Well, I want to say what you have is, I mean, there's a direct correlation between poverty and crime. Inequality, yeah, if you're impoverished, but within your city there are also fantastically wealthy people, that's going to incentivize crime even more because it creates jealousy, you know? But also you have the fact that South Africans were traumatized, really. It's a traumatized society coming out of apartheid and whatnot. And into that mix, you then throw weapons, right? South Africa is awash with guns. So, most African countries, there's barely any guns. Guns are hard to come by in most African countries, whereas South Africa, it's like the United States. I mean, not as extreme as the United States in terms of the number of guns, but yeah, compared to most other African countries, it's awash with guns. Chief Wiggum says, anyone watch that documentary with Phil Mitchell in a South African prison? I guess you mean Grant Mitchell. Ross Kemp. Yeah, he went to Pollsmoor, which is a notorious prison in the Cape Town area, which is mainly populated with what they call colored people, which are like mixed people that basically run the criminal underworld in Cape Town and in the areas surrounding Cape Town. Yeah, John Mongrel, that's right, D-Man. John Mongrel was like the leader of one of the prison gangs in Pollsmoor. Yeah, all the cities in South Africa are wild. Joburg is wild. Durban is wild. Cape Town's wild. Pretoria's wild. In fact, I think Pretoria's actually got the highest murder rate of any South African city. Shout out to Cash for the super chat. He says, did you see what Rampage Jackson's son did? I didn't see it, but I read about it because at the top of the live stream, somebody else mentioned it. We were talking about it for a few minutes. I read about it in an article, but I've not yet seen the video. Shout out to Cash for the super chat. Well, Soweto is a township which is now basically part of Johannesburg, Soweto. Long John Silver says, District 9 is peak sci-fi. I've tried watching District 9 and I just can't get into it. And I love sci-fi. But I don't know. I can't get into District 9 at all. Just don't do it for me. There's nothing about it that, was drawing me in. Just feels very sterile to me. D-Man finds sci-fi to be one of the most hit and miss genres. I don't think it's any more hit and miss than other genres. But then again, it all depends on the individual. It's subjective, right? So I saw a sci-fi movie the other day. It's not a new sci-fi movie. It might come out, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I'd never seen it before. It's called Lucy. Somebody in the live chat a few live streams ago might have actually recommended it. And the premise of Lucy is very similar to the movie Limitless. I'm not sure which came out first. I want to say Limitless came out first. And then Lucy followed it. But the premise is very similar. Exactamundo says Lucy was decent. Yeah, I thought it was decent. I preferred Limitless, but I still think Lucy was decent. East Midlands Fight Fan says it's not my type of genre. The reason I like sci-fi is because sci-fi explores the concepts and ideas which science is supposed to be exploring in the mainstream but isn't. That's why I like sci-fi. if you go back to like the late 1800s, even early 1900s, sci-fi and real science were basically joined at the hip. Yeah, so many scientists were massive fans of sci-fi, whereas today it's like they've driven this huge wedge between sci-fi and like real world science. They've almost like corralled mainstream science into this tiny little box with these very strict and narrow parameters. The thought police have converged on mainstream science. You're not even allowed to think about certain concepts, you know, which just is very unfortunate. Whereas sci-fi is where they actually explore these concepts, ideas, theories, hypotheses, etc. Exploring, like for example, the Chris Nolan movie Interstellar. Yeah, they explore the nature of time and how it relates to space, time travel. All of these ideas and theories are explored in those kind of movies. That's why I find them interesting. Even Tenet, you know, I thought that the concept that they explored in Tenet, that you could invert the entropy of an object or even a person, is fascinating. It's a different way of looking at time travel, you know? Inverting the entropy of an object. It's mind-bending. You know, those kind of movies. I like movies that make me think and introduce me to different concepts, you know? And that's why I like sci-fi, because that's what it does. It introduces you to different concepts. It makes you think about stuff you've never thought of before. Science fiction and fantasy, those two genres are the most thought-provoking genres, you know? They push the envelope the most. But for me, science fiction the most. More so than fantasy. Yeah, Inception, another Chris Nolan movie. Not my favorite Chris Nolan movie, but it's still cool. Indeed, Long John said, philosophy used to do that, make you think. Indeed. Philosophy, unfortunately, is not as trendy as it used to be in the ancient world, right? Or even just a few centuries ago. Did I like 2001 Space Odyssey? It's an interesting movie, but unfortunately, the performances are very sterile in 2001, you know? It's very impressive from a technical perspective, and the ideas they explore are interesting, you know, of how the rogue AI computer, and particularly the end of the movie, we are trying to figure out what on earth is this symbolizing, what on earth is going on here, what is Kubrick trying to convey. So it's an interesting movie, but the performances are just very flat. Okay, so I saw Weapons the other day, and I can give you a quick review. I won't do any spoilers here. Weapons, yeah, I saw that the other day. It's apparently directed by the same person that made Barbarian. The first 30 minutes of the movie is pretty dull. All right, it's a horror movie, but the first 30 minutes is pretty dull, I thought. I didn't like the voiceover. I didn't like the over-explaining. But maybe that was to try and keep the movie to a reasonable length, because it did feel like quite a long film. After the first 30 minutes, it starts to get a little more interesting. It's never really scary at all, right? There's no like big jump scares that I can remember anyway. Then it starts to get a little interesting. And there's actually a section of the film which is quite funny. So the way they tell the story, at least during the middle section of the film, is like Pulp Fiction, if any of you guys have seen Pulp Fiction. They will tell the same story or the same version of events from the perspective of multiple different characters. Yeah, that's how it's done, although it's done more chronologically than it is in Pulp Fiction, because in Pulp Fiction it's all like back to front and it's not all in chronological order. Whereas in Weapons, it is done in chronological order, although, you know, they kind of rewind and then show you the same sequence of events from a different character's perspective and then rewind it and do it with another character still and like that. So it's easy to follow the chronology of it. So the middle section of the movie is, you know, somewhat interesting, and there's a particular character, his version of events is funny. And then towards the back end of the movie, again, it's interesting. I don't want to give too much away. I'm not trying to do, you know, spoilers here. It's interesting. So for me, Weapons certainly not a bad movie, not a classic by any means, but, you know, it's decent. It's interesting. East Midlands Fight Fan says, Pulp Fiction is overrated for me. When was the first time you saw Pulp Fiction? Because that may have a big impact on how much you like the movie. Because when Pulp Fiction came out in the 90s, it was absolutely a paradigm shift for gangster films. 100% it was a paradigm shift. And so the impact it had is one of the reasons it's so highly rated. I love Pulp Fiction. For me, it's still by far and away Tarantino's best movie. Exactamundo says, I saw it as a kid and loved it. Yeah, it was a total paradigm shift. Okay, you saw it in 95. So you would have seen it around the time it came. It must have came out around 94, 95. Well, I'm not sure why you didn't like it. Me, I personally loved it. It was so different to anything we'd seen before in that genre. It had so many iconic lines, iconic characters. The exposition in Pulp Fiction had never, that type of exposition, as far as I'm aware, had never been tried in that genre of movie before, where they showed you like trivial conversations between two hitmen about to go and take some people out. The famous conversation between Samuel L. Jackson's character and John Travolta's character when they're on the way to do a hit and they're talking about the Royale with cheese and going to Amsterdam and all that type of stuff. That type of dialogue simply was not present in those type of movies before. So it was a big deal when Tarantino came out with all that kind of stuff in that movie. So yeah, I loved it. I double dare you, indeed. It was iconic. Jules, the character that Samuel L. Jackson played, was just an iconic character. There were posters everywhere. You know, teenage boys would have posters of John Travolta and Sam Jackson on their wall. East Midlands Fight Fan says Jackie Brown is better. I don't think Jackie Brown's even anywhere close to as good as Pulp Fiction. But to each their own. Jackie Brown to me was like, shrug my shoulders. You know, it's all right. Nothing special. Whereas Pulp Fiction was, indeed, as Encircled said there, so quotable. All the characters were great in Pulp Fiction. Think about it. Jules was a great character. Vincent Vega, played by Travolta, was a great character. Mia, played by Uma Thurman, she was a great character. Ving Rhames' character. Winston Wolfe, right? Harvey Keitel's character was also a great character. Bruce Willis's character, all the characters were great. There wasn't any weak performances in it. Even that guy, I forget his name now, the redheaded guy who plays like the smack dealer that John Travolta goes to, even he was a great character. Even he was a great character. The smack, Lance, yeah. Lance was a great character as well. He was hilarious. Shout out to D-Man for the super chat. He says, are you into the Jason Bourne series? Not massively. I saw the first 3 films, or maybe the first 4 films, but I just kind of stopped at the last film I saw, which was at the cinema in Streatham when it came out. And I just didn't like how ridiculously fast-paced the editing was, and it just gave me a headache, that movie. So the first 2 movies were cool. The third movie, I was like, this is getting a bit tired now. "100% I agree with the place. Jackie Brown is not close to Pulp Fiction." But, you know, to each his own. People have their own taste. But certainly if you go on any kind of movie score website, you'll find that the majority of people prefer Pulp Fiction over Jackie Brown. The vast majority of people. But hey, it's all subjective, innit? Whatever you prefer is whatever you prefer. There's no right and wrong answer. If you prefer Jackie Brown, there's nothing wrong with that. But me, I just massively favor Pulp Fiction over Jackie Brown. You know, Jackie Brown was kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It was, to me, Jackie Brown is somehow a soulless movie, you know? Just doesn't have any real soul to it. It's just, I don't know how to put it into words. Maybe it's because it's about a bunch of jaded people. Maybe that's why. Because Jackie Brown herself is like a jaded woman. And then you've got the jaded bail bondsman. And then you've got De Niro's character who's like this jaded, weird guy. I mean, it's an interesting character, right? Weird. The only characters that had any real life to him were Sam Jackson, of course. He was hilarious. Maybe the girl, the surfer girl that he has, she was annoying, but I guess she had some life in her. And also Chris Tucker's character, who is killed by Sam Jackson in a very funny way. But other than that, I'm not really a big fan of Jackie Brown. Hatman, do you think Moses Atama is overrated? We rate him high over here in Nigeria. I don't know whether he's overrated yet. We have to wait and see how his career plays out. I haven't heard anyone say that he's like the greatest heavyweight of all time or anything. They're saying that he will become a heavyweight champion, and I agree. But time will tell. But personally, I think most of the claims about him are things I would agree with, but he has to go in the ring and prove it. You know, it's all well and good us expecting him to do certain things because of his potential. There are so many fighters throughout the course of boxing history who had lots of potential, but they didn't fulfill it. So it's for him to actually go and fulfill that potential. Indeed, Enrico Atama. But he did the right thing in following in Luke Partridge's footsteps by not using his actual real first name. Because Moses is a much stronger name than Enrico. Enrico Atama, I mean, that sounds like some kind of singer or something. Moses Atama sounds way better. So, Danny says they're moving Atama too slowly. What? They're moving Atama too slowly? How? Okay, I've got to hear this take. How are they moving him too slowly? He's had 13 fights. And he says he's blowing guys out in one round. Yeah, but they don't know whether he's going to blow him out in one round until they put him in there with him. You can't predict exactly how a fight is going to go, how many rounds a guy is going to take him. I mean, they put him in against Dempsey McCain, a guy who had been the distance with Hrgovic. You know? How do you know that he's going to blow McCain out in a round? The same with Dylan White. I mean, hindsight is always 20/20. Dylan White looked terrible in there. He looked terrible all during fight week when he was walking around and his legs looked unsteady. Although he did lose a load of weight. So I thought Atama would win. I thought he'd knock Dylan White out, but I didn't necessarily know he would knock him out in a round. I said he'd do him inside 7 rounds. And his team know more than we do, but again, they're not going to know everything. They're not going to know exactly how things are going to go. So, no, I think for 13 fights, he's right where he should be. He's just fought Dylan White, a former world title challenger. So, I think they're right on course. I mean, look at Mike Tyson's career. He fought Trevor Berbick, I think, in his 27th or 28th fight. So he had nearly 30 fights before he challenged for the heavyweight title. If the great Mike Tyson had nearly 30 fights before he challenged for the title, why is Atama supposed to be ready after 13 fights? I don't get it. East Midlands Fight Fan says he's a prodigy, as you say, Hatman. Yeah, Mike Tyson was a prodigy too. But they didn't rush Mike Tyson into a title shot after 13 fights, even though he was a prodigy. Right? You don't want to spoil a prodigy. I mean, with a prodigy, you really... See, normally when you've got a guy who you don't think is that good, that's when you rush him to a title shot. And I'm talking about from the perspective of the promoter. Yeah? It's like with... this guy was good in the amateurs. Very good. Tyrell Biggs. Tyrell Biggs was rushed into a title shot. Why? Because he had a crack cocaine problem. And so the Duvers who were handling him rushed him to the Mike Tyson fight sooner rather than later when he wasn't ready for it. Because they wanted to cash him out. They knew he was a liability. The guy was hitting the pipe when he was still an unbeaten fighter. So they were like, yeah, we better get that title shot against Tyson and make some money off this kid before somebody else beats him when we miss out on the payday. But when you've got a prodigy like a young Mike Tyson, you don't want to spoil it. You want to maximize what he has. So they made sure Tyson was ready before they put him in with Berbick. Yeah? Like I say, he was about 27-0, I think, going into that fight. People talking about sausages. Pause in the live chat. South African boer wars is very good. That's right, Kayvon Green. They kept Mike Tyson busy because the guy was nuts. Yes, they kept Mike Tyson busy because they wanted to keep him on the straight and narrow. If they gave him too much time away from the gym, they feared that he would go off the rails because he was a wild kid. So they literally scheduled fights for him as often as they could. Obviously, they wanted to try and break Floyd Patterson's record, and obviously Cuss had trained Floyd Patterson as well. So they knew the way it was done. They had the blueprint of how to do it, and they had the connections and all that kind of stuff. But on top of that, yeah, they wanted to keep young Mike out of trouble. Yeah, Encircled says they basically chained Mike Tyson to the ring. That's right. They basically chained him to the ring. Kyle says Lawrence Taylor was the GOAT and he was on crack. Well, yeah, American football's a bit different. Lawrence Taylor was my favorite American football player back in the days. LT. Lawrence Taylor. John Silver says one of the guys Tyson fought early was a heroin addict. That's insane. Well, actually, it was his defense. The first defense that he made of the unified titles was against Pinkland Thomas, and Pinkland Thomas was, yes, a heroin addict. In fact, you can watch the entire HBO program for Mike Tyson versus Pinkland Thomas. And at the start of the program, when they're doing an interview with Pinkland Thomas, he's talking about his heroin addiction. It's crazy, bro. You know, I don't think anything could have been done for Mike Tyson. I think Mike Tyson's career was going to play out the way that it did, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. I don't think Cuss not dying would have stopped it. I don't think Jimmy Jacobs not dying would have stopped it. I don't think leaving Rooney would have stopped it. I think Larry Holmes was right all along when he basically described Mike Tyson as a ticking time bomb. His own team, as we said earlier on, before he got to the title, they were trying to get him from the arena back to the gym, from the arena back to the gym, and never allowing him any kind of time to himself because they knew he'd go off the rails. But that was when he hadn't made all the millions. Once a guy's made millions and he's got an army of sycophants, you think he's going to listen to anyone at that stage? He ain't going to listen to no one, bro. He's going to do his own thing. I mean, Mike Tyson described himself during his prime years as a megalomaniac. That's how he described himself. If he's a megalomaniac, you can't chat to him. You can't advise him. You can't, sit him down and give him a talking to. You can't do that anymore. He's gone. So I think he was always going to go the way he did. That's who he is. And Mike Tyson could have stayed in the game longer if he wasn't crazy. But the thing is, Mike Tyson, the fact that Mike Tyson was crazy is what made him the fighter that he was. I don't think Mike Tyson would have been as good if he wasn't crazy. Regular said, sold his legacy for $20 million. Sorry to say that. He thought people were interested in another fight against Logan Paul. So sad. Yeah, I don't personally see it that way. Mike Tyson was always a trashy guy. So him fighting Logan Paul, making a load of money, everybody knows it was a 59-year-old Mike Tyson. It wasn't anything close to the Mike Tyson of old. So, I don't know. Mike Tyson wasn't somebody that was very precious about his record anyway. That's why he committed fouls and did all that kind of stuff in the ring. So, particularly after he lost to Buster Douglas, he was like, if it is what it is. He was always a trashy guy. They tried to create an image for him when he was still with Jimmy Jacobs, but it was always a false image. Yeah, Mike Tyson's a trashy guy. He likes doing trashy things. So I think it just really fits the personality he had all along to fight Jake Paul when he's nearly 60. Yeah, Mike Tyson used to say a lot of wild stuff, even before prison. Before the Razor Ruddock rematch, he said he wanted to make Razor Ruddock his girlfriend. In that back and forth they had. Samil says Charlo and Spence are falling out. Is that right? Over what? Charlo and Spence are going to fight each other? Oh dear. I guess you're talking about Jamel, the one at 154. But is it a real beef or is it a fake beef? Because you know PBC are desperate right now. I would not put it past PBC having a word with those two guys to create some fake beef. I'm not saying this is the case, by the way. I'm just saying I wouldn't rule it out because of how desperate PBC are at this stage. They have to sell their event somehow, innit? So a fake beef, there you go. Maybe that'll draw some eyes to that event. Especially when you consider the fact that Al Heyman comes from the music industry. And the music industry is like the hotbed of fake beefs. Especially with rap music. Obviously there are real beefs in rap as well, but there are so many fake beefs. Especially between label mates. You know, when you got like the same rappers, 2 or 3 different rappers on the same label or whatever. And the label will be like, you know what would be good? If you guys had a fake beef, that would really drive sales. Al Heyman was very powerful in the music industry. Very powerful. And Circle says, does anyone else not care about Canelo Crawford? Yeah, it's not fantastically exciting, is it? Maybe it's because neither man is coming off a fantastically exciting performance. Canelo's last performance was so bad, was so dull, that it almost made you feel like you never want to see him fight again. He literally just turned up for a paycheck, had to move around, and, you know, William Skull was even worse. Samil says the fight will only be exciting if Bud wins. I can see that. As in, I can see why you would think that, yeah. Because it shakes things up. I want to say most people are expecting a Canelo win. But this is the perspective of us as like hardcore boxing fans. The casuals might feel differently about it. I don't know. Particularly the Mexican and Latino casuals. Maybe they're really looking forward to this. I mean, I'm definitely going to be covering it, obviously. Can't miss out on the opportunity to get a load of views on my live. Telstar says it's not really been promoted much. And that's the problem, isn't it? Because Netflix doesn't have adverts unless you're on one of the really cheap tiers. I think the cheapest one. So where are they going to advertise it? Yeah, on the home screen, on the UI, but you need adverts running to remind people. Has it even been advertised on YouTube? Surely it has been. Any of you guys seen a Canelo Crawford ad on YouTube? And this fight's in Vegas too. And there's still no buzz or no perceptible buzz that I get. Danny says it's on Netflix, it doesn't need promotion. Well, it does because, I mean, there are going to be a lot of people watching it, but to maximize viewership, you need those people that have Netflix subscriptions to actually watch it. Do you know what I mean? It's like with Sky. In the Eddie Hearn heyday on Sky News, and on various other Sky channels, they would advertise Eddie Hearn shows, right? They're not doing it on Netflix because they don't have that type of setup. They've just got their UI, the home screen, and certain things will pop up there, but maybe not. So they need to be advertising that on YouTube. All across social media, you know, but apparently they're not really doing it. Let's hope the fight turns out to be dramatic and entertaining, because that will obviously make up for all this. Striker's got Bud Crawford winning. All right. East Midlands Fight Fan says, is there a rematch clause either way? I'm not sure if it's a two-way rematch clause. There'll definitely be one for Canelo. I'm not sure if it's two-way. Kyle says Buddy's getting stopped. Telstar says the truth is Netflix have never specialized in live promotion. Most of their shows you can watch right away. They need to convince people to sit down and watch the fight. Regular says, I kind of feel sorry for Ben Shalom. He got bullied out by those establishment promoters. He did, but I don't feel sorry for him because he got an opportunity there, which people that have been in boxing far longer than he have never got. The guy was, 26, 27 or something? When he got the Sky deal, he just came out of nowhere. I never even heard of the guy. And there are so many small hall promoters that have been doing it for decades. They never got that opportunity. The Sauerlands, who were big promoters for the longest time, they never got the opportunity either. Somehow Ben Shalom gets it, so I certainly don't feel sorry for him. He got an incredible, inexplicable opportunity. And in fact, his BBC deal was also pretty inexplicable because he failed at Sky. He failed at Sky, and yet the BBC have picked him up when they haven't done boxing for 15, 20 years? Lon Jung Silver says, are the Sauerlands still going? Yes, they are. Although Kalle Sauerland, or maybe it's both of them, I'm not sure. He's heavily involved in misfits now. Luke Pine says, feel sorry for anyone. It's Mick Hennessy. Robbed of having Huey. Okay, I'm not sure exactly, but yeah, Mick Hennessy had a lot of talent go through his fingers, slip through his fingers over the years. Carl Froch, obviously. Luke Partridge, aka Tyson Fury. Chris Eubank Jr. was never a great talent, but he was a cash cow. He slipped through Mick's fingers as well. Mick Hennessy, aka the Fat Controller. Do I rate Jake Paul as a boxer? No. But I respect what he's doing. You know, he's making his money, he's doing his thing. But do I think he's like a world-class boxer? Hell no. He's a novice. Max says, Hatman, have you ever played mind games with your co-workers, messing with people that you didn't like? Nah, I was never really into that. John Silver says, Hatman, do you still do hill sprints? Yeah, I still do sprints, hill sprints, flat sprints. Sprinting is still my thing. Since my body responds so well to it. Although I had to buy some trainers because, you know, sprinting is very high impact. And when you're big, it can damage the knees and what have you. So I bought some Brooks trainers with the extra thick soles. I forget the model name of them. But yeah, Brooks running shoes with the super thick soles on them. Maximum cushioning. to protect my old knees. Danny says run on sand. What do you think this is, Rocky? Big up Exactamundo, Rastafari. Have a good one. Yeah, I saw that statistic somewhere, Cash, that said 95% of people will never sprint again after the age of 30. I don't know whether it's true or not, but it's interesting, right? Yeah, running on sand is not a thing, you know. You try run on sand with your, unless it's like compacted sand, then, and it have to be heavily compacted sand, then you're not going to be sprinting on sand, right? Because you get sand all over your trainers, inside your trainers, and yeah. And in soft sand, same thing. And if you try to run barefoot, well, there's like sharp shells. Somebody might have left a glass bottle. Do you know what I mean? It's just, nah. You don't want to be doing that. I know what you're saying, Danny, but the practicality of it is just, no, for the reasons I've just laid out. Jack Hammer says, what's your weight? Right now I'm about 240 pounds. So that's about, what, 17 stone 2? I don't do a lot of road work. I do sprints. I've never liked doing long distance runs. I did go through a period a few months ago where I was doing like between 2 and 4 mile runs for a while. And I was doing that for maybe about 2 months. And that's probably the longest period of regular long distance running that I've maybe done since I was a teenager. I really don't like long distance running at all. I've always preferred sprints. Regular says, I had a glass splinter in my foot for months. Painful experience. Yeah. That's what happens. If you, well, I don't know how you got the glass splinter, but you can easily get a glass splinter running on the sand of the beach, barefoot. And even some of them shells will mess your foot up. Yeah, very sharp shells, broken shells and whatnot in the sand. End up with a bad cut. So it's long. East Midlands Fight Fan says sprints get you fit quicker, in my opinion. For me, they do, but people have got different bodies, right? So you have to just figure out, everyone has to figure out what works best for them as an individual. But for me, yeah, sprints tend to get the results more quickly than long runs. And obviously, if you don't have too much time in your day, sprints are better for that as well. How much is 240 pound in kilos? It's about 110. I think it's about 110 kilos. Regular says 112. There you go. There or thereabouts. Big up Shola for the super chat. He says, what best trainers would you recommend for sprints? Well, it really depends on your individual needs, right? For me, I wear trainers which are not designed for sprinting. They're designed for maximum cushioning. So I couldn't even tell you what trainers will be best for you for doing sprints. It all depends on your height, weight, and your running style. Whether you have any issues with your knees, hips, so on and so forth. But the trainers that I wear, let me look them up now real quick. What are they actually called, the ones I have? Okay, yeah, the ones I have are called Brooks Glycerin Max. They're the ones I have. Just look up Brooks Glycerin Max. You'll find them. Yeah, they've got the maximum amount of cushioning, and they work fantastically well for me. It's like running on clouds. They're not the most responsive trainers, so if you're looking to try and go as fast as possible when you sprint, then these are not the ones for you. But if you're looking to go as fast as possible and protect your knees, then yeah, you might want to look at them. So me, I like them. Brooks, that's the brand, and the model is Glycerin Max. Shout out to Shola for the super chat. Danny says, sprinting is high impact, easy to break a bone in the foot or tear a ligament. Well, I've been sprinting since I was a little kid, and I've never broken a bone in the foot or torn a ligament from sprinting. The only issue I've ever had from sprinting was some knee issues when I was heavier. So I get knee issues from sprinting, but when I lost the weight, and especially using very cushioned trainers, I haven't had any knee issues again. How often do I sprint? Between 3 and 5 times a week. So it's pretty regular. And the type of sprints, well, there's no actual running tracks around here. So I just find flat areas, tracks and stuff like that, like a pathway, and just sprint down the pathway. Kayvon Green says, because you kept up with it, like you cannot not sprint for 10 years and then try to do it. How long for? Well, the place where I've been sprinting lately, like this pathway, I guess it's roughly maybe 90 meters. I think it's just short of 100 meters. It might be 80 or 90 meters. So I sprint down there like 10 or 15 times. Yeah, I'm not going as hardcore as I was back in 2017. In 2017, I went through a period there where I think I've said this many times before, I needed to lose a load of weight. So I did it in the summer of 2017. I don't know exactly how much I lost, but it was a lot of weight. And I was doing an hour of hill sprints on Streatham Common every day, and then going to the gym in the afternoon. It was hardcore. So any of you who are familiar with Streatham Common, you know there's a hill in Streatham Common. I would sprint up the hill and then walk down, and then sprint up the hill and walk down and sprint. I was doing that for an hour a day. And that is insane. Even now when I think about it, it's insane. No, when I do my sprints now, I sprint up the track and walk back or jog back. Shout out to Long John Silver. He says, I'll be sprinting to my bed now. See you guys tomorrow. Big up. Danny says, walking is the best to lose weight, especially when you're heavy. Not in my experience. I know many people say that, but it depends on your body. I went through a period where I was walking like 5 to 10 miles, 4 to 5 times a week. And the weight was barely coming off. But when I do sprint training, high intensity, short burst type training, both in terms of running and even the way I train as far as boxing training, that just melts the fat off me. All the weight just comes off so quick doing that type of training rather than doing like long runs or long walks. People have got different people's bodies don't all respond the same way to, different types of running and different types of training. So you have to figure out what works best for you. Alex says, what do you think about the long-term effect of men from the West going abroad to couple up with women? I mean, in terms of local men being unhappy with their women being taken. There's obviously going to be resentment, and there may be, at some point, targeted attacks, possibly, right? In fact, I'm sure there is in some parts of the world. I'm sure that a lot of the hostility, I've said this many times, towards Nigerians in particular from black South Africans comes from the fact that Nigerian men are taking a lot of the top tier black South African women, and the local South African guys don't like that, so I think a lot of it, I'm not saying all of it, but I think a lot of it is motivated by that. Yeah, they don't like Nigerian guys coming over there taking their girls. But hypergamy is something that is written into female nature. So it's not a good situation, is it? But what can people do? Everyone's just trying to do the best with what they have. Because Nigerian women generally are not particularly agreeable. That's why Nigerian men prefer to get women from Kenya, Uganda, South Africa. Yeah, Nigerian men prefer to go to other African countries to get their wives now. East Midlands Fight Fan is absolutely right. Diet is the biggest thing when it comes to losing weight. Yes, 100%. Kayvon Green says, you see in Mexico, they're kicking out digital nomads. Is that right? That's interesting. Why are they doing that? Triple R says, uphill walking, swimming, and weightlifting if you're overweight, but running is great if you're already fit. Yeah, I did all that. I did all the hill walking and hours of walking till my feet were hurting. And I'd barely lose any. The weight loss was so slow. So slow. Whereas when I get my heart rate up to the extreme highs of sprinting, I felt better. My mind felt sharper. When I'm doing sprint training, I just feel better all round than when I do long walks, or I feel like my testosterone gets higher from sprint training than it ever does from long walks or long runs. The heart rate gets up really, really high, and yeah, my mind feels clearer and everything. Kyle says Nigerian women aren't agreeable. I didn't know that. Really? Yeah, Nigeria is not the place I go for a woman, bro. Triple R says, were you into skipping, Hatman, or not really? I skipped, I never became like a super duper expert with it. Some people are proper experts, do all the crazy tricks. So I skipped a bit when I was in the gym, sometimes at home, but I was never really a massive lover of skipping. But I did do it, fairly regularly. A digital nomad is just somebody who has an online business that allows them to move around. Somebody who works remotely, basically. Works remotely and travels around. You're a digital nomad. Cal says, I've never dealt with them. I assume they were like Ghanaians. Nigerian women are just very materialistic. Like, obviously I'm generalizing here. I'm not saying every single one of them down to the last individuals like this, but generally speaking, Nigerian women are very, very materialistic. Like hyper material, almost like American women, Very, very materialistic. Am I a digital nomad? Yes, I am indeed. Ghanaians in general, not just the women, Ghanaians are more quiet, more reserved than Nigerians. Nigerians are more loud, flamboyant, and so on. Ghanaians are more quiet and reserved, generally speaking. Like the way Ghanaians talk is less animated. When Nigerians talk, they're very expressive and animated. Again, I'm generalizing. They're very expressive and animated in the way they talk, whereas Ghanaians almost have this monotone way of talking. Exactly that. Ros B hit the nail on the head. Nigerian women are very bougie. Yes. Very, very bougie Nigerian women. I'll leave them alone, bro. I'm not interested in any of that. apparently now Nigerian women are complaining that their men are going overseas, well, not overseas, but crossing borders to get their wives from places like Uganda and Kenya now. They can't understand why Nigerian men ain't marrying them. It's like women everywhere never learn, innit? Damn right, Nigerian men are going to go to Uganda or Kenya to get a wife. Women from those countries do not have such ridiculously high expectations. So, yeah. And also when it comes to, I don't even like this word, but I'm going to use it anyway. Nyash. Nigerian women cannot even come close to competing with Ugandan women at all. It's just that simple. And with Ugandan women, the back off is crazy. That's an old school word as well. Ugandan girls, the back off is a madness. Most Nigerian girls ain't got it like that. Yeah, Ghanaian girls can maybe compete. Yeah. I would agree with that when it comes to Nyash. That's right. The Why Are You Gay guy's from Uganda. Yeah, he's a Ugandan. Simon Kagwanjala. That's his name. He's from Uganda. Anyway, peeps, I'm going to shut this one down. What have we been streaming for now? 3 hours, 3.5 hours? Yeah, we'll call it a day there. That's a decent shift. So, as always, it's the custom now. I'd like to shout out each and every one of you for joining the conversation, and a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were President Brush. I hope all the Super Chats are appearing here, because this live page is a bit glitchy, but apologies if I don't mention. I'm just reading the Super Chats that I can actually see. President Brush, Matt Borgerson, Lawrence King, D-Man, GMS Nightmare, Sanjay, Bobs, Ocean Blue, James Clifford, Copezilla, Kayvon Green, Agni, George the Last Patriot, Cash, and Shola. Big up for the Super Chats. Okay, so until next time, you guys take care, be good, and I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.